Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this introductory workshop on how to talk about climate change. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this super important topic. As we settle in, we'd like to acknowledge that these lands we occupy are unceded ancestral lands of the Eastern Cherokee, the Uki, and the NNOCCI people. It's my honor to introduce my friend and colleague, third actor, Karen Willey. Karen is an environmental educator, a former nature center manager for Sarasota Audubon, and currently she remains their climate change point person, Zoom moderator, and newsletter editor. She's also on the coordinating committee for Third Act North Carolina Working Group. Karen founded an environmental education company through which she created standards-based curriculum for grades K-12 focused on local ecosystems and cultural heritage for over 20 years. She's an NAI Certified Interpretive Guide and serves on the Communications Committee for the National Network of Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. Karen and her husband, Matt, bought a home in Asheville in early 2022, and Karen is currently becoming a certified Blue Ridge naturalist through the North Carolina Arboretum. Karen?
All right. And I just want to say I consider myself a climate change communicator, a flower hunter, a people connector, a tree hugger, and an educational consultant, helping folks to learn more about native plants and ecosystems. And because I'm a naturalist, I want my grandchildren's grandchildren to have access to the same beauty that I see around me daily. And that's why I communicate climate change. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen.
Can I just ask a question? I've sent this message. Rosemary is saying she can't get in, so I'm just letting you know that. I don't know what to tell her.
Okay. Well, Rosemary, you want to resend her the link?
Yeah.
And I will, yeah, hopefully she can get in because there's no one in the waiting room at the moment. So
No.
Okay, thanks.
I'll let her in. All right, we'll get started. Oh, I have to hit the share button. That helps. Let's go here and there. And okay. So thank you all for being here today to talk about NNOCCI and climate communication. And I've been introduced and I will take questions at the end. So let's try this. All right. So our hope today is to introduce you to a different approach for climate communication. And we're only going to begin to cover this unique approach and hope that it can inspire new thoughts and techniques for you as you move into conversations with others around climate. Like I said, it's very introductory and we're going to need a little bit more training to actually write a story, but this is going to give you a good basis. So, public perception. This basically is telling us that the majority of people in the United States agree that climate change is happening now. We are not in a minority. You can see this. This was done by Yale Program on Climate Change Communication last spring, 2023. So it's pretty current. The big issue is that only 23% of people think that hear people they know talk about climate change at least once a month. So we're not talking about it. And a lot of us agree, but not a lot of us are talking. So we need to move forward with that. And when we think about what our audience is receiving on climate change, things we see in the media and what we're reading in the news, what emotional or intellectual feelings are they getting? And a lot of that is embedded in doom and gloom. And when we lead with fear and crisis, it leads to very short-term responses. For example, the American Red Cross, when there's a disaster, they put out donate right now, and they get a lot of donations, but then they fall off really quickly. So we can argue that's not what we want for climate change. We want behavior change. We want culture change, which takes a different mindset. And so we use the principles of the National Association of Interpretation, and interpretation in this, the meaning of interpretation here is taking the science and interpreting so that regular folks can understand it. So we use NAI, the National Association of Interpretation, and other communication tools to lead people to something that is hopeful, inspiring, and empowering. And that's what I want to introduce you to today. A strategically framed approach rooted in hope and solutions. So here is our this National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation is the group that creates this presentation and that I'm representing now. And our goal at NNOCCI is to train enough voices in proven communication techniques to shift the national conversation about climate change to be more positive and civic-minded. And today I'll introduce you to tested tools that you can add to your own tool belt and empower you to engage in solutions-focused, hopeful climate change dialogue. So I'm going to play a short video to hopefully. Let's go. There we go.
The National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, known as NNOCCI, is a committed group of informal science educators who are changing the conversation on climate change. Rather than doom and gloom, they're focused on hope and civic action. Educators at aquariums, zoos, and museums facilitate millions of conversations each year, but climate conversations weren't happening because science educators were unsure of how to guide them productively in a family-oriented setting. Thanks to funding from the National Science Foundation, a partnership was formed between climate scientists, informal science educators, and social scientists to create a training program for interpreters at aquariums, zoos, nature centers, and parks. The program worked with strategic framing, an empirical approach to science translation to help interpreters in their work and in their conversations with friends, family, and colleagues. The NNOCCI program launched in 2011 and has been refined as the network grew. Program evaluations have found that our alumni develop more confidence in their ability to explain climate science, increasing their willingness to discuss climate concepts. NNOCCI language increased people's understanding of climate change, their support for solutions, and commitment to civic engagement. And we've shown that strategic framing can turn concerned individuals into active and engaged citizens. By July 2017, over 400 colleagues from 170 institutions in 38 states had joined our community, and our community is reporting consistent improvements in its own effectiveness. Using innovation, collaboration, and empirical inquiry, NNOCCI has launched a growing network of climate interpreters with tools that help millions of Americans understand why our climate is changing and motivate them to get started on solutions in their community.
Okay, so we've got a problem. People are not talking about climate change, and we have an opportunity. All the people that we are encountering in our daily lives. So how does NNOCCI change the conversation? So we have a suite of programs that we offer to communicators around the country, ranging from self-paced online materials to intensive online crash courses, which will be, the next one will be offered in the fall. And there's also a multi-month trainer program that's offered annually. So at the end of this program, I will email everyone who has registered a list of links so you can access these resources. All right, so it's interesting to note that a lot of how the message is received depend on what is already in someone's head. So this has implications for our work. Knowing how someone might process the information they receive can help us to craft the story of climate change to be most effective. So particularly now, with increased focus on social and racial injustice, it's important to take time to navigate the landscape with our climate conversations carefully, so our approach is thoughtful and impactful. So we're going to start with talking about how we process information. All right, so I'm going to ask you to get a little interactive. If you search the word ocean in Google, these are the images that appear. And what do you notice? What do they have in common? I'd like you to put your notes in the chat box. If you can just, what do you see in common in these pictures? Anybody? Here we go.
They're blue.
Okay.
Waters,
Yeah, okay.
water, sky, waves, sun, animals, currents.
Beauty. Okay, great. Calmness. Yep.
Mm.
So notice the vast majority of these images focus on the surface of the ocean and depict only water. If there's an animal present, right, it's a charismatic megafauna. We see whales, maybe some dolphins. So we know the ocean is a lot of things more than just the surface. But it's no accident that these images are also similar. It tells us something about how our culture thinks about the ocean, what the models are that we have in mind, and how we understand them. So our mental shortcut about oceans includes the surface, the sun, the waves, all these things that we're seeing. And it's mostly water. So this is an example of what anthropologists call a cultural model. And there are multiple cultural mindsets on any given topic or issue. And these mindsets are widely shared. They're durable, which means they're long lasting, and they structure our thinking. So, cultural mindsets are built over time through repeated interactions with people, institutions, with media. So think of the brain like this field of tall grass. If you walk through the field once, you're not going to see any pathway that we're seeing now. But if you walk through the field the same way again and again and again, the path is created. And the same things happen in our brain with repeated exposures to ideas. That's how learning happens and culture is learned. So cognitive scientists have a term for the places in our brains where many paths come together, and they're called schemas, but we don't need to know all that. Okay, so what about the default thinking for climate change? Some of the common misperceptions. Look at these two comics, for example. Why don't greenhouse gases escape through the hole in the ozone layer? Well, science tells us that those two things are not related, but if people don't understand, they fill in those holes. So what I want to do now is have you think about a common misperception that you hear about climate change. And don't press enter, but I want you to go ahead and type them in the chat box, but don't press enter. We're going to do a waterfall of misconceptions. All right. So I'm going to give you a minute to write something that what springs to mind for you that people say about climate change that is not real or not correct. Give you a minute. And raise your hand when you're ready so I know, I get a feel for how many are getting there. Take your time. Okay. Have I given you enough time? All right, everyone hit enter. Let's see what happens. All right, great. Oh, you guys are good. Okay, let me see. It's natural. It's a political untruth. Nothing we can do about it. It won't affect us. Warming will be better for Northerners. Like that. Natural gas is part of the solution. Not so bad as people make out. It's cyclical. It's a host. It's gradual. It's weather. It's normal. Climate has been changing. This is nothing new. See, you can see the cultural models popping right out. It's too late. It can't be done. It's caused by volcanoes. So a lot of things were similar. It's cyclical. It's a host. It's not true. So this gives you an idea, right? We're all part of the, we hear these problems over and over again. So a key element of strategic framing is understanding the default thinking or cultural mindsets. So I'm going to play another video. This one's a bit longer. It's 5 minutes, but it shows a couple of man on the street. So let's play. We're going to play this. Go ahead. There we go.
As part of a larger, more comprehensive investigation to find out how the public thinks about carbon dioxide and its role in climate change, Frameworks researchers conducted rapid interviews with ordinary Americans in locations across the country. So let's take a look at what this looks like in some excerpts from our on-the-street interviews, a rapid response research technique that Frameworks uses to confirm and visualize the findings of more in-depth research on public thinking.
What role do you think that carbon dioxide or CO2, what role does that play in the climate?
Very bad one.
Gosh, this is awful. I should know all this stuff.
Give me a definition if you don't mind.
It's what you exhale, right? Trees absorb it.
Think of trees like processing carbon dioxide usually.
Isn't that like the car exhaust?
The fumes out of a car.
Car exhaust.
If you leave a car on in a garage, the carbon dioxide will go inside that car.
I think if trees absorb it, we exhale it. It's not good for us to inhale, but it's good for plant life.
So what do you think happens if there's too much carbon dioxide on the planet?
That means everybody's gonna die. We're gonna all suffocate.
The impact, if there was massively like too much, it could impact our health in general. I don't know if too much of it could also negatively impact plant life.
I don't know. Probably like greenhouse gases or something like that.
Something about the ozone, I think.
Oh, it affects the ozone layer greatly. Well, everybody say the greenhouse effect, global warming. It like puts a hole in the ozone.
It's breaking down the ozone. I think it's the one that's doing that. I'm not sure.
I think it just like disrupts the ozone layer.
People were unable to easily reconcile carbon dioxide's role in respiration and photosynthesis with its role in climate change. To explain the harmful role of anthropogenic CO2, Frameworks developed and tested the taxonomy of regular versus rampant carbon dioxide. This helps distinguish between the CO2 that is necessary and CO2 buildup that is problematic. Researchers read this passage aloud and then asked participants follow-up questions about carbon dioxide, as well as some of the broader causes and consequences of climate change. Let's listen to how this way of framing information about the effects of CO2 worked to help participants distinguish between beneficial and harmful levels of carbon dioxide.
Yeah, from what I'm getting, regular is just the like standard. If there was no influx of carbon dioxide, regular is just the equilibrium. It's I breathe out, plant breathes in on a cycle. And then the rampant is if two people breathe out and there's only one plant, the plant only needs the one breath. In a very, very simple analogy.
We're producing more carbon dioxide than a normal like life cycle or like environment would like naturally. Just as like humans produce it and like the environment consumes it, like plants consume it, and it's like just building up. That I mean, carbon dioxide is a part of life. We need some of it, but we currently have way too much in the environment.
We have to find a way of lessening this rampant carbon dioxide that we're putting out.
Oh, you want to get rid of the rampant if you can, I mean, as much as possible.
You know, more carpooling, more buses, more public transit, more bikes, just things that we can control in our everyday lives, things that are very simple that we just don't do.
Or find alternative fuels, lessen the emissions of the carbon dioxide that we're putting into the air.
There are things we need to start sacrificing and changes we need to make, or else it's just gonna keep getting out of control. The rampant carbon dioxide is just like the excess carbon dioxide that we're producing that like human beings weren't always producing, so it's like not natural.
That there's more of it than is necessary for just normal life, not just human life, but plant life, you know, life in general.
Naturally in the world, there is carbon dioxide, and there needs to be a certain level just to keep every process, photosynthesis and everything else we need. You know, we are going to exhale carbon dioxide. That's going to happen. But now that there's too much of it, it's throwing the balance of everything off in the environment.
This taxonomy offers a way of organizing pieces of knowledge which otherwise might seem to conflict. Also, use of alliteration reinforces the idea that these two concepts are a contrasting pair, which helps distinguish between what is common knowledge about carbon dioxide and its role in trapping heat in the planet's atmosphere. This latter information enables thinking about impacts and consequences, including connections to other phenomena like ocean acidification. This framing tool's ability to establish a sound causal understanding and to head off dominant misconceptions likely to arise otherwise about carbon dioxide was qualitatively and quantitatively tested with nearly 3,000 Americans.
Okay, so we know a couple of things don't match up. Americans do care about climate change and its impact on oceans, but they have no idea how it works or what to do about it. And the bottom line is this: if people don't know what carbon dioxide gas is or what its role is in climate change, they aren't going to generate productive ideas about what to do. So we're going to look at some of the cultural mindsets that Frameworks Institute identified. And this is a map. It's nothing you need to know in depth, but we use this in creating our communications. It's important context as it grounds all of our work and the tools we talk about. So the values, explanatory metaphors, and community level solutions have been proven in research to cue the green cultural mindsets. So for instance, these buckets, nature, science, health, all of these have green mindsets that are proven to help the public understand the cause, mechanisms, and implications. The red, on the other hand, are unproductive, and these are things we don't want to use. So when we look at nature, we can say that nature is vital to humans or that something needs to be done about climate change, but we don't want to say that nature will fix itself or that carbon dioxide is natural. And these are things that we're trying to get people away from. So when somebody says to us, nature is going to fix itself, but we're going to say, but nature is vital to humans. So again, this is a map we use when we're deep into the communications creation, and you won't need that. So how do we craft messages and engage in productive conversations? We are going to use strategic framing. And this is a research-based approach that is proven to bridge the gap between scientist and public understanding. That's the interpretation piece. It is a research-based approach that helps the public understand the mechanisms of climate change. It will show the public how they can be the heroes of the climate change story and leave audience and communicator with a sense of hope. So this includes a set of recommended communication elements that, when used together, will allow us to strategically navigate our way toward the biggest impact. So here's how we are going to create our core story. We're going to answer these 3 questions. We don't want to say this is climate change and it's real and we're all going to die. No, we want to strategically frame it saying, why does it matter to society? How does it work? And how do we improve the situation? So we're going to think of your story in these 3 parts, and this will stop people from trying to fill in the blanks. And it will end with giving people a feeling of hope, efficacy, and agency about climate change. That whenever you talk about climate change, you need to include these 3 pieces of the story. So let's start with why does it matter? Yes.
There's some people with hands up. I'm not sure if they're asking questions or they did that when you asked to raise the hand.
Ah, okay. We can unraise because I had,
Okay.
yeah.
Just checking in.
Yeah, I don't know how to unraise it. If you could unraise your hand, unless you want, you can put something in the chat and we'll answer, but I think, yeah. Okay. So using tested values aligns the issue with something people already care about. And there are a lot of reasons why climate change matters, but not all of those will move the public to act. And some will actually turn them off, according to our research. So we want to frame the issue, climate change, with something people already care about. And we can't assume that everyone cares about climate change for the same reason that we do. So the research by Frameworks Institute found that 2 values are the strongest, most reliable ways of making the case for meaningful changes in line with scientific consensus. So if we all work to focus on these 2 values, our impact will be amplified. So the 2 values tested and found to be most effective are protection and responsible management. And I'm going to go through each one of those now. So protection is a value that tested the best at getting the most people oriented and supportive of climate change. Climate action, not climate change. So the protection value says we must protect and preserve the habitats and ecosystems we depend on. Showing concern for others is the right thing to do. Stepping in to ensure people's safety and well-being. Let's take measures to eliminate or reduce risks. And let's be vigilant in shielding people and places from harm. So this value emphasizes the need to shield from harm, stepping in to ensure people's safety, and it underlines the importance of risk reduction, concern for the welfare of others, and preserving habitats. So that's protection. Now let's look at responsible management. This value stresses the importance of using common sense and step-by-step approaches to come up with responsible long-term plans that act in the interest of future generations. Let's be responsible when it comes to the environment. Let's look ahead to handle problems before they get worse. Responsible managers keep an open mind, look to evidence, and take a level-headed step-by-step approach. And future generations depend on the decisions we make today. So there's no rule of thumb for which value to use in a communication. I don't recommend using both because it's hard to clearly convey one or the other when they're together. Some values work better for certain topics, and you'll get an intuitive feel for which one you want to use when you're starting to work your communications. You can't go wrong with either. And it's natural to go slow in the beginning, but once I started climate communication, I had to practice quite a bit. And I just reading through these cards, and I will get you a link. Like I said, I'll email to everyone. These cards are available in PDF form, and you can practice yourself. All right. So here's a couple of examples of using these values. The first one, we believe we need to protect our forest resources and increase trees in our urban environment to provide benefits to our community and for the future. So this is a simple line that can be used at the beginning of a climate communication that invokes the value of protection. And here's an example with responsible management. It's important that we all take responsible steps to manage the issues facing our environment, to leave our planet in good shape for future generations of animals, plants, and people. So this actually invokes the future generations. You don't have to use that, but using responsible management. It's short and simple. It's a start to why does this matter to society? Okay, so now we're going to look at the second part. How does it work? The middle of our story. And for that, the next strategic framing tool is explanatory metaphors. So we want to know how this works. And if someone understands how something works, they're more likely to act. So making sure they understand the mechanisms at work is seriously important. And it's also empowering. Communication can backfire if we fail to take into account what people are bringing with them to the issue. So we frame to help us avoid this problem by using research that's been done on how people think, and then coming up with ways to talk about the issue based on the research. So if the problem is that people don't know how climate change works, then a tested explanatory metaphor is a great tool for teaching this process. Good explanations help people understand the mechanisms at work. If they don't understand the problem, they might struggle to identify a solution. So when we make an abstract idea more concrete, it becomes sticky and people remember it later, hence the use of the metaphor. So when you talk about climate change, if you don't connect the dots for people and they become unsure, they might fill in that cognitive hole with unproductive or misleading information like that ozone layer. So when we link the causes and impacts of issues, it motivates people to think productively and come up with solutions. And we're using the explanatory metaphor. So here are the 4 metaphors in our toolbox. The heat trapping blanket. You saw the use of regular versus rampant carbon dioxide on the man on the street interviews. Climate's heart talks about ocean currents and how they actually drive climate. So the ocean is like, the currents in the ocean are like climate's heart. Just like it pumps through our body, it pumps the currents through the ocean, pump climate. So that's a really interesting one. Osteoporosis of the sea is very specific and only used for ocean acidification. So it's not something we'll be talking about in the mountains very much. And we're just going to go focus on that first one, the heat trapping blanket, because that is the one that is the most clear and concise. And it's the one I use mostly anyway. So this metaphor makes some choices about what to emphasize and what to de-emphasize. It focuses on carbon dioxide buildup as the most significant factor contributing to temperature rise or global warming, and on the use of fossil fuels as what's adding the carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. By starting with the premise that the atmosphere is a blanket that becomes thicker when CO2 is added to it, the metaphor very quickly establishes that a hole in the ozone is not the problem. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So let's read through this. The heat trapping blanket says that the atmosphere is like a blanket that surrounds the Earth. And when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and methane gas, we add more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which thickens that blanket. And the thicker the blanket gets, the more heat is trapped underneath. And this blanket effect leads to warming, which disrupts the climate. So by introducing the idea that burning fossil fuels thickens the blanket, the model makes humans accountable for our actions. It pulls forward the idea that we have a shared fate with nature. And explaining how the carbon dioxide emissions from burning fossil fuels thickens the blanket, trapping in heat, takes away that change is natural or it works in cycles. So putting all these ideas together, it's clear that only reducing our reliance on fossil fuels will help. And again, you'll get these cards and NNOCCI says use them word for word. There's no such thing as plagiarizing when using our materials because this is the proven language that's going to help. All right, let's look at this in action. There's kind of a checklist. You want to use that fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas or methane gas are the major underlying cause. The blanket is made up of the heat-trapping carbon dioxide, and the buildup is creating the blanket effect. So you don't want to substitute terms. That's why I'm saying use the words that are in the greenhouse gas or carbon pollution can make things confusing. So stick with heat-trapping blanket and carbon dioxide. And always describe an impact. So here, as the climate warms, our cities can become increasingly hot. So we want to have an impact. And the other thing is use a matter-of-fact tone as you're talking, not a crisis big and scary. And we want to be concise. So we want our communications to be short like this. This is it. So I'm going to go through this and click through here, starting with a value. We believe we need to protect our forest resources and increase trees in our urban environment to provide benefits to our community for the future. Then we're going to clearly state the big cause. As we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas to power our lives, we are putting excessive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This excessive carbon dioxide is building up the atmosphere and acting like a heat-trapping blanket, causing the earth to warm. So this is our metaphor, the heat-trapping blanket. Then, what's the problem? As the climate warms, our cities become increasingly hot. And the solution is planting trees in our cities can help cool the urban environment and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels to power that cooling, while also absorbing some of the excessive carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Trees and people are part of the solution, so we're connecting the dots and putting people into the picture. So then this is the Morton Arboretum was the one who wrote this story. This is one of their interpretations. So the Morton Arboretum is committed to providing tools, best practices, and learning opportunities to inspire action for trees. So they're making themselves part of the solution as well. So this is one example of a strategically framed climate communication. So the last part of the story is connecting people to how they can help improve that situation. And we do that by connecting them to collective, community-based solutions. So, Goldilocks tackles climate change. This is too big. This is too small. And this is just right. So we want to find, like I said, working together. And then we want to be sure that we're equitable. And this is an interesting comic from during COVID. We had we came together as community members, but we didn't want to go back. We want to go forward. We don't want a new normal. We want to move forward. So And your community. We want to be community level solutions, but that doesn't have to mean your city or your state. It can be your school, your book club, your Facebook group, your third actors. So think about what your community is, and it starts small. And by keeping this in mind, we broaden our ability to look for solutions which will engage the people we're talking about, making sense for their area. And when we include community level solutions, we're telling people that concern for our climate is normal and that action is happening all around us. And that gives us hope. And we also can understand that the sustainable choice is the easy choice for most people because that's what other people are doing. So you may have, okay, so that's how to improve the situation. And by framing the problem and explaining it and linking the problem to the explanation, the direct effects felt by the community, we're empowering our audience with knowledge. So we're going to foster engagement and hope by framing that climate change as a problem that can be addressed together on a collective level through practical steps. So when you think of community level solutions that you could use in your climate story, you want to be specific with programs, initiatives, or approaches that you know they can access. So your audience is aware of what solutions exist in their community and how they can get involved. Take action. So there's three types of solutions. There's the simple energy shift, moving from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. There's energy efficiency by reducing the demand for local fuels, for fossil fuels. And then this solution, talk about it, should be used in every communication. Because like I showed you, the slide at the very beginning with the statistics, 74% believe it, but only 23% are talking about it. Research tells us that the majority of people in the United States are concerned about climate change, but they're self-silencing because they think they're in the minority. So I'm telling you today, you are not in the minority. They're also nervous about talking about climate change because they're not confident they can talk about it correctly. So getting these tools are going to help you use them, practice them, read them word for word, and get to know them. So you can talk about when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, they create this heat-trapping blanket of carbon dioxide around the earth. And the more fossil fuels we burn, the thicker that blanket gets, and it traps in the heat. We can empower people who are already concerned about climate change to talk with their friends and families. And collective, local, and existing, that's going to get you where you need to be. Here are a couple of things that we found to use with caution, and here's words to use instead. So politicians can be polarizing, but if we use the word civic leaders instead, that's helpful. Policies can be polarizing, but approaches, not so much. Laws can turn people off, but programs are okay. If you want to talk about regulations, use the state or city name. And when you instead of using the word government, maybe use municipal. So these are just some ideas on changing our language to stay neutral. Here's another solution that someone in our NNOCCI network, I'm going to read this, put together, and I'm going to read this and remind the people of the value. We are at the park, dedicated to working towards handling these problems before they get too big to handle. So the problem is, we are communities around the state have been asking their leaders for better food options. So this is the problem. They were looking for better food options. All right, so we want to explain how they help reduce carbon dioxide. Community gardens help because they can help make climate-friendly foods more accessible and reduce the carbon dioxide emitted when transporting vegetables to your grocery store. They're great at helping us adapt to the intense rainstorms we are getting as an effect of climate change by absorbing the stormwater, and they're great places for the community to come together. So these are all co-benefits. I bet you are not the only person in your neighborhood that is concerned with the abandoned lots. I would start talking to your neighbors to see who else is interested. And here's a specific example. The Belle Isle Salt Marsh in East Boston was restored because neighbors in the area wanted to keep that area for recreational uses and came together to make sure that it happened. So talk about it. Always use that solution. By talking to your friends and family about how and why you are taking action, you can help us protect current and future generations by tackling the source of the problem. So this must have been a bigger story about seals. Anyway, so we want to encourage our audience to talk about climate change with their communities and contribute to solutions. So this is basically our toolbox. Why does it matter? We're using the values of responsible management and protection. How does it work? We're going to use some explanatory metaphors, particularly the heat trapping blanket. And then how are we going to improve the situation with community level solutions? And again, I will send a follow-up email with links to these videos, to documents, papers, and blogs provided by NOCCI that will help you to create your climate story. And also there's a template that will help you using the 5 components of strategically framed climate communication that we talked about today, or 3 anyway. So NOCCI.org, you can follow them. You can learn more at NOCCI.org/training. Actually, and then Third Act, that's us. Follow us on Facebook. We have a Third Act Western North Carolina Facebook page and a Third Act North Carolina Twitter page. They both have really good info. And you can go to our website. So